Good afternoon. So I thought I'd do a video rather than a stream today because I want to try and keep it short and my voice might give out if I talk too much. So I have been a bit quiet over the last week and a half, mainly because I have been firstly enjoying summer and secondly because the market's just been really messy. So I've been quite bogged down. Like I tend to, when the market gets too messy, and I'm talking generally about the majors, because I look for confluence on a lot of things. If the confluence isn't there, it can then, well, it throws me off. But also I tend to then spend heaps of time thinking about things, too much time thinking about things and not enough time making actual decisions. And then I end up not streaming or not posting anything because I'm not certain enough. And also I don't want to give information that I'm not sure about. So that really hasn't changed, to be honest, but what I can do at least is tell you what I'm looking at. And yeah, sort of there's some macro things which are concerning, which I have talked about before, so it's not going to be anything new, but there's some things that are lining up. The difficulty is the kind of mid-time frames is just becoming very choppy, so it becomes, and it's hard to know how much things are going to retrace, and it's not always that clean. And if you look back, for example, at previous, like this drop, for example, that we had back in June, retrace virtually the whole thing before dropping again, despite the fact it had supply through here and here. Okay, fine, this one, it can take out the immediate one, but potentially I would have been looking for shorts here or here, and it went, it didn't quite take out the high, which is what everybody would have been waiting for, but then had a significant move down, but like retraced the entire move. Then in contrast, the other thing I'm comparing to, well, I'll go to that in a minute, but for example here, there we had a nice rejection of supply, and here eventually we ended up going very, very sideways and didn't even go back to test supply at all. So when I'm looking at, where I could look for shorts, it then becomes, particularly if there's lots of zones, and in a situation like this, where we've got lots of chop on the way down, like we've made a daily supply in there, which is why I have an alert just for that. But then, there's a 12-hour, 12-hour, and a 12-hour, looking at the 12-hour chart here. And, it's hard to know. And there's a lot of liquidations at 120K. So are we going to reject here? Are we going to go up to 120K? Not sure why my color is pink. Let's make that red and black. And yeah, so are we going to go up to 120K? Is this still bullish? Are we still, we've still made a higher low here, just about. And then even then below, similarly, and I have talked about this in many streams, once we've had a run of this magnitude, and not even just including the most recent wave since May, from all the way from November 2022, that's a long time. I feel like I'm looking at the wrong thing now. It really is. It really has been that long. I guess it has been that long. Obviously, we've left, I'm not necessarily looking down all the way down the 46K or 20K area, but obviously we've left so many zones throughout these run-ups. Even if I just take it from May, we've got 3 months demand in here. We've got a monthly demand just at this level. We've got a 2-week demand in here, multiple zones inside that 2-week that haven't been tested. Then you've got to consider where the fibs are, where points of control are and things like that. And, when we're doing small ranges, it's much easier to do that. And or if we just clean, we have one up move and we come back to test the start of it. But in the case of Bitcoin, it doesn't like to test. So we end up with a lot of untested levels. And the risk you then have is something I've also said in many previous streams, is that we then just throw a giant red candle through everything. Alternatively, do I look for us continuing a similar move that we've had previously, that we're having up here, where we slowly come down, varying and bounces at different magnitude potentially in here, but where we bounce on every zone. And then again, I tend to get bogged down in which zones to look at and confluence and things like that, and there's so many of them, and then I delete one and then I decide I want it back there because it's got another valid reason for having it, etc. So that's kind of why I end up not posting. And also, when the market's going up, like I'd much rather look at alts because I think they're way more interesting. Like I say, Bitcoin become messy. We had a few nice shorts in this area. but didn't get very far. Then there was a weekly supply in here. And I had highlighted there was an hourly supply above here that hadn't been, or a 2 hour, I think, that hadn't been quite tested up here. So we had some nice shorts for scalps in here, but then obviously ultimately it came up and swing failed the all-time high. And obviously that was the day I was at a UB40 concert. So I wasn't here for this. And then it came down and just didn't give any retest. But I was AFK at that point anyway. So, and I've been back for the last couple of days, but it's been, again, trying to figure out, where exactly we might bounce. The other difficulty we had here is I think there was a CME gap. Where was it? Sunday, I guess. I think maybe somewhere around, I think it was actually a bit lower. I think it was here. And therefore I was looking, so I can show you that on the lower time frame chart. So if we look here, I think I wanted this to hit, but back here. So the other thing is, even earlier in the week, last week, I didn't want to look for the early longs in here, and even here on the retest, although there was a 4 hour demand, because I was thinking that it was more than likely we were going to come back and fill this CME gap. But then obviously we didn't do that until after it had broken higher. And then as of yesterday, I was looking for, I had an entry here for this 4 hour, 8 hour demand on the higher low, which I've had in there, I think, for a while, since the CME gap, and I think possibly even since my last video. But now we have this swing fail of the high. This low then becomes a weak low and therefore is less likely to hold. So thus it is holding the zone for now, but I think it's come through the 4 hour, but it's still in the 8 hour or 12 hour, but it's struggling a bit to get higher because I think ultimately it wants to take out that low. Now on the higher time frame, the challenge we have, so we're already in my, we're in my box of looking for potential rejection. It's taken a couple of wicks through the top anyway. So this was the 131 to 127 fib of this the last wave retracement here. And just hide the drawing so you can see. So obviously we had a weekly supply, which would then wick through and has closed back below. So it's pretty bad close on the weekly. One of the other things that I've really been looking at a lot, and I have talked about previously, is this 2021 top. And the reason I was looking at that is because I was looking in conjunction with Korea. So if you follow me, I look at the Korea pair. So back in 2021, when we took out the all-time high in the first time in October, the Korean pair hadn't taken out all-time high. So then price held, and then it came back and took it out again in November, which is when the Korean pair took out all-time high as well, and then the whole market fell. And now history doesn't have to repeat, but one thing I was conscious of when we came to current price is that at this point in May, the US dollar pair had taken out the all-time high, but again, the Korean pair hadn't. So when the Korean pair did come back and take out all-time high, that's when I was looking more likely for a possible reversal. And it doesn't always have to happen, but again, if you follow me, you may remember we had a similar scenario back in June 2022, when I don't think it was anything of taking out the low. Actually, no, it was. You can see here that in December 2022, when we made the low on the Korean pair, we made a higher low on the US dollar pair. And I think it was at that point that the Korea pair came down into the demand. Until that point, the Korean pair had been hovering just above this demand. And in fact, I think the US dollar pair might have wicked through it there. I'm not 100% sure. It's potentially wicked through that demand, which it can do. Whereas the Korea pair, I like to follow because it's a lot more reliable on holding zones, whereas the US dollar pair is much more likely to swing fail or stop hunting zones. So similarly, what we were waiting for at the end of 2022 there was that for Korea to hit the right zone and then the whole market to be ready to go up. And it's exactly what we got. So it's worth watching for that Korean pair. So we have that initial indicator of the Korean pair now also taken all-time high. But the other observation that I wanted to point out was just, again, the similarities in these structures. The log scale. So what was really interesting, actually, while these look very different, these 2018 wave, the 2018 correction and the 2021-22 correction, well, one thing I kind of observed on this, even though the magnitudes were different, and thus the correction on the 2017-18 correction went down, while as initially the 21-22 went up and then came down. In fact, all the waves on the lower time frames are very similar. They were just different magnitudes. So it was kind of interesting to watch, particularly when this started to come down the second time, because it really started to follow similar structures, internal structures on the lower time frames as to the 2018 wave. And again, that's something which you can observe here. So if we look at the top that was made in January 2021, it's not dissimilar to this top. So I should say hypothetical top, because we've got nothing confirmed yet, but this, what if this is a provisional top that we had at the start of 2025, there are similarities in that structure. And if I go down to the 3-day, you can see there's a lot of this sort of similarities in how this low was formed and how that low was formed, with a lot of wicks. And this did make a lower low, whereas this made higher lows before pushing up. Then similarly, this area, the correction in the middle there, is not dissimilar to the correction that we had in, what's that, May to June. So you can go back and look at this yourself. It's probably not that easy to see. I mean, I can't really draw it out, unfortunately, because otherwise all my other drawings will come back. But I should probably flip to another chart. But similarities here did retest into the zone, whereas this retest that we had in June was more aggressive and came up a bit higher. And then now, as we're hitting what, again, maybe another top, we can also see similarities. I'm going to get a chart that's easily visible. It's quite hard to show. You can see we're right at the edge of the screen here, that we had this sort of consolidation, tried to break down and recovered itself, and then went up for the swing failure. And it's exactly the same here, that we had this consolidation, tried to break down, consolidated, then went up for the swing failure. And then what we have on both of interest is this 3-week demand. So in these similar structures, we've got a 3-week demand in here, we've got a 3-week demand there. Notice that when this fell, it did come almost to the bottom of that 3-week demand, which again then makes me slightly more skeptical of the lower time frame possible long entries that I've got. But it's just something to be conscious of, that there are similarities in these patterns. I'm trying to think now, there were other similarities I was pointing out yesterday. It was also Ether. So the other thing was, at this point in time is when Ether had its run, which is exactly what's happened this time. And we actually have some continued run through this area on Ether BTC, but the Ether US dollar pair didn't make a higher high after that point. However, if you look at the Ether chart, you'll see while Bitcoin really started falling here, Ether held for quite a lot longer, thus the Ether BTC pair pushed a bit higher. Now, again, there's a lot of differences in the BTC chart and the structure from now and to back then, so that's not necessarily the best comparison. Anyway, like I said, these are just observations and things that I kind of just use to try and, like, anyone can long this on a demand and try and go for a new high. That's fine. You could do that anytime you like. What I'm trying to do is look for signs that things might be topping out from the investment perspective. And so at the moment, it's still very early days. We've got this sort of weekly swing failure, which isn't great. Ideally, what we want to see for bulls now is potentially, coming down and taking out this weekly low and then closing back in the range. And then maybe we'll be safe for a while longer. And as I said, we've got a 3-week demand just below there. And then we've also got a 3-month not far below here. And if those start breaking, then I'm going to start being a lot more nervous for the higher time frame, and are we going to have that 80% drop that we get when we have these major corrections? I mean, really, even to make these comparisons is dubious anyway. And there are sort of pros and cons of this. This to me, when you compare the strength of this move compared to the strength of these moves, looks pretty lame if you think about it. This is on the 3-month chart. However, it is making 3-month demand, so that might at least mean that even if we do correct, we might correct slowly. But these aren't really significant up moves. They're very long consolidations compared to the previous ones we've had. So maybe I'm not right to then compare, this potential top to this potential top. you know, and like I say, there's a lot more local to demand. So even if this is a top using that same pattern on the lower time frames as 2021, we have a 3-month demand that's where is that? My drawing so you can see. So we've got a 3-month demand, which will be kind of the equivalent to here on the 2021 pattern. So until we start breaking those, I'm not going to get overly concerned. You know, if you want to have your stick bids, we've got an annual level of 46k. And then, you know, because I've got so many initial entries on this, you know, we've got the 3-month demand in here, we've got another 3-month demand in here. But again, from a higher time frame perspective, that sort of 93k area, that's where most of the ETFs were buying in this up section here. And then a lot of what was pushed afterwards was some ETF stuff that came in later. But a lot of the push through here was derivatives and short squeezing. So it's kind of done more than I expected. But then, yeah, I think the ETFs were supporting price a lot more than I expected. But anyway, yeah, if we get a bigger drop, 93k, that kind of area would be significant area to look at. You know, the 61 fib is down there on the log scale. I think the higher on, so the linear scale actually perfectly lines up with that 3-month level and the 61 fib. So it'd be great if this is the top, and that could be a very neat re-entry on the 61 fib around here, like 93 and then down to 90k, and there's a CME gap there that wasn't quite closed. So yeah, there's nothing to be overly concerned about on macro at the moment. Other than, like I say, those signs that just to be aware of, that in case we play out 2021. Similarly, we also do have potentially 5 waves. If this is over, this doesn't have to be over. This could still go a lot higher. We're in my kind of potential zone of rejection. We hit the 61. I think this is the 61. It's my writings there just about. Yeah, so this red line is the linear 61 fib, and then the log 61 fib is all the way up here. So we still have the potential to get to 175k. And if I look, yeah, I should probably quickly show you my macro chart. Where are we? So I haven't whacked this one out for a while. So a log scale on this. Got a million drawings on this, so there's quite a lot of hidden. But so this is the parabola that we've been running since the dawn of time. And then I look at where we've reached on the trend fibs and where on the retracement fibs. And we are seeing that rolling over, reflected in the fibs, so that it would reach the 78%, 78% and 227 on both of those. But then the last 2021 move only reached the 61 fib, 61 trend fib and 161 retracement. This time at the moment, we did initially reject the 61 trend fib, but now we've come up a little bit higher again. So we're at the 70% trend fib and the 141 retracement fib. So I will always have this large box as my kind of macro target, you know, stretching from the 61 trend fib up to the 161 retracement fib. So it could be anywhere from the 102 to 170k, so it's fairly big range. And then this was a sort of local little box that I had based on that last up move. And so, yeah, if we do fall, then as is normal. So again, like I normally look at, what we've corrected to. So we corrected to the 161 retracement fib the first time, then we corrected to the 141 retracement fib, then we corrected to the 88 retracement fib. So each time the correction is kind of getting less, I believe, or is that? I need to get my fibs back on there to see. But either way, I mean, we're broadly doing 88% or sorry, 80 to 90% retracements. Is my price. So I think we did slightly above that last time because it's slightly front run. So 77% last time. So if we were to do a 70% retracement, 77% retracement this time, that would take us down to 30k and that 3-month level down there. Potentially, though, we're going to see ETFs and like the more traditional finance buying holding it up. That 62% would be at the 46k mark where that yearly level is. But But anyway, this is, like I say, this is very early days. We haven't had any sort of blow off top. But then a lot of people were expecting more of a blow off top back in 2021, which we didn't get. We had a completely different structure. And again, we've got, as I say, we've got this sort of stepwise structure going up here, which I don't really love from an impulsive perspective. But then that also could be more traditional finance. If you look at gold, it's quite a similar sort of stepwise structure going up. It's just not what we're so used to in crypto. Yeah, so anyway, nothing to panic about until we start breaking demand and like holding supply. So we have that, like I said, the provisional concern is having, zoom back in, the provisional concern is having swing failed the weekly high there. So now we're looking for, what weekly close are we going to get? And also for, like, I'll go on to the market cap charts, but also those are sort of a fairly big issue. Like, a lot of those are looking a lot more bullish. So it'll be interesting to see if we get some more movement on the majors, or whether they're going to give us more of an indicator of breakdown if we start to see their demands breaking, because they have a lot of those. Like Bitcoin didn't quite create, or it closed the 2-week demand by a hair over that level, but it's come back down and retraced that entire 2-week candle from prior. So I mean, it's potentially swing failing the bottom of that. But anyway, we just need a bit more time for this to develop and see if we, if we get railroad tracks on the 2-week up here. That's not going to be ideal. This red candle closes down here, then we're certainly going to be looking for shorts in 2 weeks' time. We've still got 11 days till that closes, coming off that 2-week supply. And then, yeah, looking at the lower time frames, looking at those major levels below. So yeah, you can see the levels I'm looking at for possible longs in there, and why I'm concerned about there being too many of them. So yeah, I'm not going to go into detail about each of these now. Like, my most immediate one would be the most aggressive, or 4-day supply up here, and there's a 2-week just inside that. There's monthly lows here, a couple of equal lows here that could get taken out. We've also got a 3-week demand. We've got an untested 12 out at the bottom there, etc., etc. So there's various reasons all going down, but also, like I say, I don't want to spend too much more time on that until I actually know that this is the top, because then I can more effectively see where the fibs are. So moving on then, I don't think there's much more to say on, Korea and CME. So yeah, they're still in local ranges. US dollar dominance is the other thing, I guess, that kind of makes it more concerning from a high time frame perspective. And again, still very early days on this, but from a confluence perspective with the Korea swing fail of the high, and then again, the coming back and taking out the weekly high, we had a lot of confluence on this. So overarchingly, this is a massive 6-month demand, and it's the third hit on it. So we had a low, and then we took out that low, and we still didn't quite make a high. So we're still really inside with consolidation in a triangle. Excuse me. But I wanted to see this test. We had come back into monthly demand here. So I had the initial, not alert, I don't alert this, but was watching this from the first hit on monthly demand. It's come down a bit deeper, and then it's come down deeper again into 3-day and 5-day demand inside. And now we've had, obviously, a fairly decent move up. So now we just need to see, again, but while I say it's a decent move up, still very much a downtrend. So it needs to break this high, or we could still see this. So it needs to break that high there, but even then it's going to go straight into monthly supply. So it has made, similar, so it's the same as Bitcoin really, with that 3-month demand right below. This has this monthly supply right above. And the larger structure on this does sort of say to me, up. A little more cylinder there. So the difficulty here is, again, I did want lower here. So we've got 2 6-month demands here stacked on top of each other. Take my drawings off so you can see. So we come into the first one. What we quite often get when you do have them stacked off on top of each other is that it comes back to the lower one. So there is still the possibility that this comes back to the lower one. And if that's the case, then maybe we'll see 175K on Bitcoin. But what it did do is when it bounces, it then made this monthly demand. So again, it's indecisive because it's off a lower high, but it's, again, not something I want to be looking for longs on crypto market with this hitting a monthly demand. The other thing is when I look at the other stable coins, So more critically, if we look at US dollar, C, what does even C stand for? USDC circle, is it? This doesn't have that same 6-month demand, but this has a 3-month demand. I think I can put the drawings on this. I don't think I've got too many. Excuse the lines, I was discussing this. So we were in a 3-month demand here, and then it's made another 3-month demand. And when we had the top, that's exactly when this tapped into that 3-month demand and has come up quite strong. So this wasn't, so you can see that this structure is much stronger than the equivalent US dollar dominance. So where US dollar dominance has made a lower high and has come down fairly deep, this chart, and I've only just recently started using this, so I can't say which is more valid and more reliable, but just again from a confidence perspective, as soon as it's tapped into that, it's where the US dollar dominance made a lower high here, so it's got the same here, made a lower high, and it's sort of like there. You can see that this is significantly stronger for whatever reason. So this is just something to be conscious of. Similarly, locally, this has taken out the previous July high, whereas the US dollar tether chart hasn't. It's still got 3-week supply above, but it hasn't got a monthly. So there is a lot more strength in this. Now, the lines I was just with the discussion I had a few weeks ago with one of the group, and I was saying, so from a 3-month perspective, on a 3-month chart, in fact, I find the green line is the most likely. And then the black, the second most likely, and then the red least likely. And while that generally doesn't look great for the crypto market, but that would be just looking at this chart in isolation. So yeah, I guess we'll see how that plays out. But anyway, yeah, there's strength showing on this that we don't quite see on the tether chart. And then the amalgamated chart again just looks more like the tether chart, but similarly had a monthly demand. Now we're here where it's just tapped into, still got the monthly supply above, so we just need to see what reaction we're going to get there. As far as comparing, I did compare back to 2021 to see, but it's not really comparable. The structure, obviously, this was still a more immediate uptrend, whereas this has been an extended sideways period. So we can't really compare this to here, or even the kind of bigger picture. Maybe I can compare that whole thing, but no, it's not really comparable to be able to say that this is going to do the same as 2021. But yeah, again, there were some signs on this which kind of aren't great for the crypto market on these US dollar dominance charts. On the flip side, try and get some more happy news, potentially happy news. So on the totals charts, we have, and on a bunch of the majors. So I'll start speeding up a bit. I've been a little bit slower on Bitcoin just so I could talk a bit more about those structures and about my concerns. But what we have here, so obviously this has closed more strongly than the Bitcoin pair. So it's closed with a more significant 2-week demand in here, and it's back testing it. And it's not ideal, like it would have closed like it's still a swing failure of that high. I think it's just closed right on the level there. Or just a little bit below the level for it to be. So it's still possible this is a swing failure as well. But again, this from a bullish perspective, I wouldn't trade against this 2-week demand until I see a more significant supply put in or this 2-week demand broken. And so we had a 2-week demand, and then this also, these charts, these totals charts, also just think in the context of the majors, because some of the majors have been quite challenging, and like I say, that's why I've been delaying on my updates. So here, 2-week demand and 5-day inside, and then also a 2-day inside there. So a couple of the majors have hit sort of similar 2-day levels, which I had alerted. And I just need to see the reaction. So you can't, at this point, we are still very much in an uptrend retrace. This could still keep going. We don't love the swing failure on the 2-weekly chart, but we're still in the 2-weekly demand, it still exists. So I just need to see what reaction we're going to get when this retests. If it retests. Alternatively, if it just plows straight through here and then we get the retest later. So that's total. And note that these total and total 2 are obviously very much held up by Ether, the strength of Ether. What again, I haven't actually looked at these, at how these looked in 2021. the end of 2021, so not dissimilar to Ether actually. In the case of Total 2, we'd expect that. I guess Total is going to look not dissimilar to Bitcoin. Yeah, that's probably not overly helpful over what I've already said. So Total 2, again, we had this sort of monthly supply in here, and that's where I was looking for the initial reaction with the strength of Ether, just push that through. And I'll get to Ether as well, but obviously taken out this high, but not quite taken out all-time high again, makes it slightly awkward. Like if we'd seen a swing failure with all-time high, then that's something we can trade off. I mean, this is still potentially a lower high or a swing failure in this case of December 2024, but makes it quite hard to then know if it's going to go back for a second go. And at this stage, that's what we've got to assume Ether's going to do until proven otherwise. So again, similar scenario here to Total 1. We've got 2-week demand. There's a 2-week in there that it's tapped into. It's got a weekly just above it that we're already tapped into. And like Total, it's got the 5-day and then the 2-day in it a bit lower. So again, this has scope to go lower. Ether's going to retain its strength, and we expect this to kind of probably bounce a bit more aggressively, which is what we're seeing at the moment. And all of these now have this daily supply, as does Ether. So I have alerted, I believe I've alerted the daily supply on Ether. And we'll just see again what the reaction is. So early days, still in an uptrend, but we're just looking to, are we going to get a rejection on these retests? And all of them the same, Bitcoin, Ether, totals. And then as we run down the list of the market caps, we see the weakness start to come in. So obviously, Total 3 still has also made the 2-week demand, but by less so. So we're looking a bit more like Bitcoin and hasn't taken out this monthly supply. Again, still back in, testing it, hit the 5-day inside, also a 2-day inside that. And then below on this, we got, go back to the lower time frame. So we tapped into a daily at this last low, not quite into this 3-week level. And then we've also got a monthly demand a bit lower. And I'll probably talk about it a bit more on the others chart, but remember my sort of reservations were that we had this impulse. Oops, need to do that. We had this impulse up, this correction, and then it was just a question of, is this the start of some new move that's then going to go up, or is this a B wave looking for a C wave, either in a triangle, like for example up to here, or into a zigzag and coming back down to test these levels? And that's the sort of reticence on the higher time frame. And it's not quite as pronounced on this. It's a stronger move on Total 3. We have seen the majors in some cases be significantly stronger, being brought up by things like Ripple, TRX, even Litecoin's been relatively strong. But yeah, still looking for, is this going to be a macro double top? Is this just a corrective move, an A, B, C wave for a bigger correction? Are we going to correct this whole thing all the way down here? And, let's not forget that if the double top plays out, then we could end up taking out this low. And that would be a severe blow for the crypto market. But again, from a chart perspective, it's not outside the realms of possibility. Might take a few years to get there, though, we hope. Or it's crypto. It could probably do it in a day if it wants to. Anyway, so Total 3 is still looking relatively strong. Excuse me. Have some water. Smoke the second half of my cigarette. With that irony that if I smoke, I cough less in the short term. But yeah, anyway, so we've got macro double top, then we've got potentially a kind of double top here, and then we've got a local double top, or possibility of a local double top. Or, if you're bullish, then maybe you think this is going to break out. But for me, as you know, I don't get bullish at supply, and we are at sort of fairly major resistance level. So I think I've said in previous videos, if I see this come up and then we get the test off the top here, then great. But for now, I'm looking, I'm short biased on retests of supply and looking for alts that are going to give those shorts. And I'll get onto alts, but because alts have like a massive mix on alts, and I've said that again, reiterate what I've said in virtually every stream, is that you've got to trade each alt to itself. Like, I don't believe there's an alt season. I don't believe we've had one since 2021. I think it's probably likely we're not going to have one again. I hope I'm wrong, because people like them. But I actually much prefer the market like this. I much prefer trading in both directions. I don't like alt season. I don't like runs like this where, it's exactly the same as what I just said on Bitcoin, actually, that when you have runs like this, I'm waiting for it to come down here because I want to buy demand. I don't want to FOMO in, I don't like this daily, sure. Like I'm quite happy. This actually is really not too bad. It's kind of just tested a daily. Once you've got the daily, then you've got a weekly, then you've got a 5-day and a monthly in here, and you've got trend line stops, and it becomes difficult. And I tend to wait for things to come back to ground zero. And what we've got at the moment is most of them do. But we have some short periods of time like this where you have to get in on local 8 or 12 hours. I mean, if I see them, I'm okay with doing that, but it's quite hard to pick that, and it's been very hard in this run to pick, even just this last section here, to pick which alts are going to take off. So yeah, again, as I've said, so what I tend to look for is when the ones that take off is trading them back down and or FOMOing in higher if necessary. But I think, to call every single alt as maybe it's going to break out has been very, very hard. Anyway, so that's total 3. And then, like I said, we see the weakness going down the list. So others, we did look at this daily demand here for a bounce. Preferably, I would have rather it had gone to the monthly or 3-week down here. I had commented also in previous videos that we've hit the 61 fib in this daily here, but I thought we could go higher because we hadn't quite hit 3-weekly supply up there. So again, that's exactly what's happened here. And again, anyone who follows me knows my view of the higher probability on this being is that, again, we had the double top, and that I was then looking for the possibility of a head and shoulders here with targeting somewhere down here. And that's, again, in the bigger picture, my concern being that we had this big up move here. Just take some of this off so to explain this better. If you follow me, you would have seen me say this a number of times anyway, but even ignoring what happened back here, we had a decent up move here. We had a retracement. We had another up move that wasn't strong enough to break the high. So what that's telling you is this is not a very strong demand. If you go take it back to the original impulse, this overall is not strong demand because it was unable to make a significant move above the high there. So that's when we come back here. Excuse me. That's when we come back here. We get a bounce, but it's not likely, being it's off a weak demand that hasn't had a significant move before, it's not likely that this is going to break the high. It's possible we could get that 3 pushes to the high. It's possible it makes a slight push to the high and then we get the drop. But what is more likely is that we're going to see that head and shoulders be created. So again, what my concern has been is that we had this last up move, we retraced it, and we're getting an A, B, C wave, and we're going to go down and seek better demand. And better demand will be below, below this zone. What is going on? Okay, below this zone, and the next zone is down here. So that's the logic there. I would have rather this had not made monthly demand in the middle. That's sort of this. So the counter argument to that bearish argument is that we put in a monthly demand here. And we are still having an uptrend here. So it is possible we get another move up. Maybe that monthly demand will be a strong move. I don't know. I need to see what happens when we hit this zone. But the point is, at this point in time, with that head and shoulders structure in mind, with this now having hit 3-week supply, it wasn't ideal with the previous high that we had. Remove all my drawings so I'm not leaving a mess all over my charts. But so this high that we had back in, when was that, end of July, wasn't ideal. So thus we got this second push on this, taking out the high. And what we got on the alts is a real mix. So I'll show you the majors in a minute, but in many cases, so we had, most of these things had a 4-day supply in here. Some things have just rejected it, some have swing failed it, and then a few have broken out. So it's been pretty hard to pick which ones are going to do what. Some of the ones you might expect to be stronger weren't. But yeah, I'll get onto the majors in a minute anyway. But anyway, this is So again, what we're saying here is, we've on the lower time frames exactly the same as that bigger structure that I just drew. We've got a daily demand here. We've come and tested it. We haven't made a significant break above this high. So while it's possible, so basically what it's saying is this is weak demand. We do have the 2-day, the 5-day, and the 2-day in here in the same structure as I said for total 3. This is weak demand. Yes, it might hold. Yes, maybe it can make a higher high, but it's not a high probability. And what we would expect now is for this to come back down into better demand lower. So at the moment, that's what I'm looking for on others. And then with being conscious that the bigger picture means that this could just go straight through everything. And I have no doubt that it will if Bitcoin comes down. That's what I will say. So Bitcoin is going to be the key indicator of all this. If Bitcoin can hold up there, then we will see the majors and the bigger alts. The little alts are just all over the place anyway, but we will see the majors and the bigger alts hold. And DeFi. So DeFi, the other one to look at is TOTALDEFI. I have been more bullish on this than anything else because of the dominance of this. But again, now this is still in monthly supply. It's still, so it does have, it's more like total 3. It does have this 2-week demand. But again, it's still in macro supply. So I don't want to be looking for longs on this particularly now. So really, I'd like to see so much like total 3 on this. I either need to see the bigger retracement, maybe not as deep as the monthly down here, maybe even like the 3-week here, even in the daily on this, a little bit higher, or I want to see, the whole market is going to go all season or whatever and break out higher, take out these highs, that high, and this high. And, this is going to be over a period of weeks or months. I don't expect this to happen overnight, but properly take out those highs, consolidate up here for moves upwards. But for now, this is not where I want to look for longs, personally. And having said that, like I say, I have put alerts in here, with alerts for things that have hit this 2-day demand or this 5-day demand. There is nothing wrong with you scalping those. Just be conscious of what you're doing and be conscious that we're in major supply. So that's TOTALDEFI. And then on the smaller end of the alts, my half chart where TradingView decided to delete all the history. So I still have all the zones. I don't even really know if it's worth looking at this anymore, but this really was to highlight the weakness that we have on this versus others. So if you see on others, we've got this up move that's taken out the high and has made this channel upwards, badly drawn. What we have on this is it hasn't managed to read this. It's only got a wick over that high. So what we did have in here was something I think like this. And then I was saying we would either make a triangle or we'd make a channel. But in this case, where others has managed to make the channel, total excluding top 100 hasn't. And again, so yeah, overall this is just weaker. And then again, this reflects things I've said many times before, that the smaller alts just pop as and when at random, and it's pretty hard to choose which ones you're going to trade. And then finally, just quickly on the dominance thing. So we've got BTC dominance has fallen, has now actually broken trend. Let's this for a couple of days, or it's on the edge of the linear trend and has broken this log trend. So we've got a sort of dubious trend line all the way from the bottom there, and all this more local trend line with that deviation below it. So we're kind of below that on the log scale, but sort of clinging to it on the linear scale. This was at 6-month supply at the high, but had now come down at a 2-month demand. So again, it's a sort of just a bit of an awkward structure, and it's just messy. So, but this to me, again, everybody else is calling it for all season based on this falling, because again, that's what we had in 2021, and this fell, or 2020. Yeah, it was actually throughout 2021. But when we actually had the top in November 2021, this was actually down here. So really it bears no resemblance. Even if I compare the 2021 top to now, it certainly bears no resemblance on dominance. I don't know if that's just because more money in Bitcoin, more people more inclined to trade to stablecoins. Again, back in 2021, I think there was a lot more trading against US dollars, but we were still doing a reasonable amount of trading against Bitcoin, I think. So But anyway, I still don't think that this bears any resemblance to this to be able to say that this is an indicator of alt season. What I would prefer to look at for an indicator of alt season is US dollar dominance. That isn't really giving me any signs of it being alt season. Ether dominance, like Ether BTC, I'll get to it. So, these were finally the levels we got to that I was looking at. So monthly supply here, and we've hit the weekly inside the monthly, still holding this structure. Again, when I compare to that 2021 top being in November 2021, that's what I was saying earlier, that when the US dollar pairs topped out was here, but this still ran an extra leg because Bitcoin was weaker compared to Ether. So again, this is still in supply, like I've probably, there's a 6-month level up here. So if we treat this like a normal chart, which I'm always a little bit skeptical of, there's a 6-month up there and there's a monthly up there. So this still could move higher. But again, it's not something I don't particularly want to long Ether when I see dominance is up in a major zone like this, and Ether BTC the same. So again, I'd rather wait for this to drop either down into this weekly down here or into the monthly lower and hope it doesn't have. So what we did have over here when we reversed, we did have these sort of significant drops to retest, and we haven't had anything of the sort yet. So there is the concern. I might have a look back at what happened in February, or what the charts looked like to cause such a big drop in February 2021 here. Or maybe that was just Bitcoin running. But why that had such a significant drop in February. Others dominance. Again, so overarching, I think I did put like this annual zone back in. I think I was kind of just forgetting myself, like while I was saying, like I've said a number of times, that I wanted to get back down into this zone here, or even lower. It's 2.5%, that would be bad. I had kind of was forgetting that overall we are in an annual demand. So while you can look for lower, the lower time frame zones inside the annual to be hit, I still don't want to forget that we're overall in an annual demand. So this is still very much messing around in here. We're still under 3-week supply here. We might make a 3-week demand, and that's something to look for on most alts. We've got the new 2-week demands, and it's really just messy. So similar to the majors here. So and how I described them before, that we have 4-day supplies, and a lot of the majors have stopped in this similar structure, but then they had flipped to 5-day demand. So it's just like a messy consolidation through here. It's making a nice little sort of trend line stops above. So I was wondering if we were going to get a bit of a dominance run here, even if it went up into that area. But again, it's quite hard to judge this until we actually see the potential, things start to break out. Maybe we'll see that today with Bitcoin having been weaker and Ether having bounced a little bit better today. But still pretty early days on this, and my preference would still be down here, but I can watch that trend line to see if we are going to get a trend line break and if alts are going to run a bit more. TOTALDEFI, as I've said, is strong anyway, but it's difficult because it's hit a 2-month supply, a bit like Ether dominance. Had a weekly demand in there, which it's bounced off quite nicely. So I guess overarchingly, what we're seeing sort of mostly across the market is that everything is at a point it could reverse, and that's the concern. But on the lower time frames and the mid time frames and high time frames, we haven't got any reversal signals particularly yet. On the lower time frames, we do have some, and we've got things that are making us wary. The lower time frames or the mid time frames, we need to start breaking some of these demands, or at least to see these supplies rejecting. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with trading either way. You can trade longs off the local demands and shorts off the local supplies and just see where we go. Anything that's massively overbought, short back down again. Oversold, be a little bit more careful of, depends on the coin. Because some are, some delistings and things like that are really affecting things. A lot of the ones that are pumping are actually new listings on Upbit. I think it's been one of the ones that pumped a few things. And then finally, the total excluding 100 again, have the historic chart. Possible double bottom here. So I guess there are some possible signs on others dominance and E100 dominance that we could get a bit of an alt run. I don't know at what point I think I just need to see them start running. I mean, like really, again, this would have to break that high, make a higher low, and then start to show a bit more of an uptrend. At the moment, it's a possible double bottom, but we're still in a sort of a possible local downtrend. And the bigger picture is still potentially down on this. And the same with this, you know, if we're going for we go for the higher time frames. We've had a couple of hits on 3-week and weekly supply in here. We might make a 3-week demand. So I guess if we can hold for the rest of this week, that's promising. But again, we are still in a downtrend. So while we can look at the lower time frames and think there's hope, this gives a little bit of hope that way. That's consolidating in here. So I guess if we get another run on this, that would be the next area that I'd look at, and then bigger picture, 2-month supply up here, but this daily in here. So that would still retaining the downtrend here, with this being a sideways and a drop. This is still being a downtrend. But that would be a nice little run on alts if we did have that. So interesting to see what comes up over the next couple of weeks. So that's pretty much it, I think, on the market as a whole. There's a few possible signs that we might get some alt runs in there. And we need Bitcoin to hold and do a bit more sideways, I think, for that to happen. So quickly on to Ether. So Ether, I was looking for a swing fair or stop hunt of these lows here. One thing I had drawn on the Korean pair last week, and it did go up more. But I just said, these I think I've seen this too much in FX. These little consolidations under resistance just make me think like that. That's just the most common pattern. This then did go, like I thought it would be quicker than that. This did go higher and held for longer. We did lose some data on Korea over the weekend. So I think on Saturday and Sunday, I don't know if it's been added back in or not, but these zones in here aren't necessarily accurate. But anyway, just as a lower time frame kind of scalp entry, I was looking for the CME gap to close, take out these stops and potentially fall into the 4-hour demand. So I'll show you on the lower time frame chart. So I was looking at the possible swing failure here, but also with being conscious that we could go to fill that CME gap and go into 4-hour demand. So that hit really, really nicely. And I have thrown in a short alert here on daily supply on this. And we'll just see. So as I've said, like Ether is still very much bullish, could still very likely go up and take out that high. And yeah, just need to see a lot more develop on this. On the mid time frame, so we have a 2-weekly and weekly demand in here, which is where my sort of higher time frame alert, and then the green and the circle version that I've got down here is the new monthly demand. So they're the kind of bigger levels that I'll be looking at if we do get a bigger drop. And then, as I said, just be conscious of what this structure that we had back in 2021, and that we could potentially see some of that strength. We're still in it here if we're mimicking this structure in any shape or form. So we could still get some messing around before we get any sort of bigger drop. And let me just go back. Yeah, structure is very different on the lower time frame, so it's harder to judge. But just watch this daily as we come into here. I did have an alert set here for all-time high, but obviously we didn't quite get there. We just took out some little stops from the high just after, but I hadn't alerted that. So again, I was away from my keyboard on the Thursday and Friday, so I missed any sort of short on that. But it would have been a hard one to get in. I think that it did give some re-entries there over the weekend, and I think it gave something on the hourly, like if you've been watching this at the high. But yeah, like I say, I wasn't around. Ether's just keeps going. So I've had I had an alert for the weekly supply in there, and it just consolidated a bit and went straight up to the top of that. And arguably, it's still holding that zone because it hasn't taken out the high, but obviously went a lot higher inside it, so that wasn't really tradable. And yeah, so that's pretty much it on Ether. It's just, for now, is still going and is still nothing that's going to make you short on the macro. But again, given at the level it's at, we really want it to be breaking all-time high, coming back, retesting, king new demand, etc., and to start actually see pushing above all-time high, rather than the sort of similar messing around that Bitcoin's doing. And we do have actually what we do have on the Korea pair is it has taken out all-time high. And then on the BTC pair, not dissimilar to dominance. We're up in this monthly supply here. We did have, this is one, you know, I didn't have an alert on it because obviously people aren't shorting in the BTC pair, but that was the kind of area that I was looking at. We do have these stops over here, so the other thing, if we do get a bit more of a run on Ether still, I just want to kind of watch and see if we get a swing fail over these. I think I put those, so these are the 2 monthly highs at the orange lines. But then really you've got sort of trend line stops into this 3 week. Is that a 3 week or is it a week? No, it's a weekly. I commented in my last video, TradingView made this quite annoying change where they turned on the text for all drawings. So it's just permanently on. So, and they're like, it's okay, you can just go through and delete. And I'm like, that's great because for some reason, because I think sometimes I copy and paste lines. And then just turn off the text. So like a lot of my what are actually weekly, yeah. So this is a weekly zone, but it says 3 week against it, and a lot of my monthly zones now say 3 month against them because I've just turned off the text rather than actually deleting it. So yeah, having to correct a lot of my charts. So don't get confused if you see some zones. So like here, you can see it says 3 month against this when it's actually a monthly zone. But yeah, so I have to go through and correct a lot of things. Yeah, so anyway, so obviously we're at a trend line resistance on this. We're in monthly supply. There is a possible draw to go a little bit higher and take out some of those stops there. Again, I'm not really sure I say that, but it's not, people like that type of thing, but is it really valid when you're on the Ether BTC pair? I think maybe you can short this on margin, but I mean, this is not going to be a big driver of the price, people shorting the BTC pair. So there's no real reason for it to go and take out those highs because there's not shorts to be stopped out up there and there's not liquidity particularly to be up here. I mean, maybe people will look to close longs there once these highs have been taken out. So that could drop the price. But whether it's really valid, the price has to go there because there's liquidity there is I'm slightly more skeptical. However, that would be the kind of area to watch the next area of resistance to keep an eye on. Just put a circle on that so we can see if it was there, and or up into this weekly, depending on if we take out more of that trend line. So the immediate monthly highs there. And yeah, we just see where Ether and US dollar pair is at that point in time when, as and when, if this gets tested. Yeah, not much else to say on Ether. So we've got some decent long entries on Ether at least. Get a long down there at the low, and then this long on the retest has been quite nice today. And then we'll just need to see, maybe this will keep running. So got the alert here for daily supply, and the 4 hour, there's a 4 hour inside just above it. Has also left an hourly up here though. So the problem is, then we start looking at all these levels that are untested above. So there's kind of this, and then there's that 4 hour inside. I wouldn't alert that immediately, but then there's this 2 hour up there that hasn't been tested. So again, is it going to throw one giant candle through everything, or is it going to give some nice scalps off each of these zones? I don't know. And I'm still a bit low. I'll think about whether I want to put in new long entries. If this just runs straight back up through that daily, is it a daily? Yeah. If this runs straight back through this daily supply, then I'm showing that a great deal of strength, then I'll be more inclined to look for what demand has been made to get a potential long re-entries on this. But I'll also see where Bitcoin is at the time. Looking like Bitcoin's not going to get anywhere near the daily at the same time as Ether gets to its own daily. But I just need to see what Bitcoin's doing and then think about whether I want to put some long re-entries on Ether for our higher low. And this isn't the world's best demand. It's just a 4 hours, a lot of chop below it. There's untested zones below that. Yeah. So I need to think that through a bit more. I also, these are not high probability shorts, just so you know, but just look for scalps that they do have decent props coming off them. But again, we've still got that bullish structure and people are still going to be very bullish on Ether, so just be a little bit careful on the short side. Right, finally on the majors. Definitely don't want to spend too much time on these. So we'll do a quick run through. I did have a look at a number of the BTC pairs earlier, and we do have quite a few of them now in 6-month supply. So again, just something to be slightly conscious and aware of. BCH, BNB, LINK, DOGE, ADA, a number of them. So when we're looking for, again, for confluence into getting a possibility of taking profits on longs or looking for shorts, then it's good to have the confluence of the BTC pairs. So again, just be a bit aware of that. So TRX obviously is still super strong. One of the things I was kind of hoping for as a top signal was this to hit this 4-hour supply here. It's a pretty big zone, and obviously can still go to all-time high, but that's kind of what I was hoping for. So just because we like having a major as a top signal, and BNB can be a good one, and TRX can be a pretty good one as well. So I have had a long re-entry alert on this 5-day demand, and here, like, I'm nervous on these now. It does feel like buying the top. It does feel like they're overextended and just sort of grinding, but again, until proven otherwise, may as well keep looking for longs. Obviously TRX is still pretty strong, one of the strongest, and then looking for shorts up there if it gets higher. BCH also sort of similar to TRX, just keeps grinding. This makes me incredibly nervous. To know if it drops, it will take out all the stops. I actually don't even want, so I'm going to remove that alert. I had this alert, I think, from back here when I was thinking one of these might come back down and take into this zone. But now, like, if it comes down, I would want to watch this 3-month demand. A 3-month level, 3-month demand, 1-year retest, 2-week and 3-week demand inside. So yeah, this whole kind of area would be where I would look for long entries on BCH if it comes there. But very, very aware of this, and that if this does start to run down, it's very likely to take a big wick. So be very careful on trading this. It is now back up in annual supply. It has had multiple hits on it already. So we're still very much lower high, still just about a lower high. So again, not something I particularly want to be looking for longs on. I did put an aggressive long. So I put aggressive longs just, I think, on the old majors. So on Litecoin, TRX, BCH, and maybe one other. BCH and LTC eventually ran through them, and I'd said they were not very high probability, given I feel like I'm buying the top now. So yeah, there was a 2-day demand here. We've now obviously made this 2-week below. So now I've got a 3-day supply in there. So in fact, when it hit this 2-day, I actually then put a possibility of a short entry in this new daily supply, or 12-hour supply that's up here. Unfortunately, it didn't even bounce strongly enough to get back up there. And has now come deeper. And again, I said the 2-week demand, I didn't bother alerting just because it's too big and there's nothing really locally to make a decent entry here. You don't want to be putting a stop all the way down there. But leaving that 12-hour supply alert in there for now, just see what the reaction is off here. Again, still in an uptrend, but still it's just looking choppy and messy. And I still have an alert for if we get to that daily supply up there. Just take out this high. Again, it's a very, very messy chart there. XRP. So for those who haven't seen my, we've got the triangle, XRP triangle breakout, fake out pattern. So I did this for amusement value. So red line can delete the black one, I think. So yeah, XRP likes these triangle fake outs. So it's a big triangle, and I was like, maybe this is another larger triangle fake out pattern before it drops. And then as a sort of semi joke, I also kind of put, well, and what if we have this as well? We also have this massive triangle fake out and then drop possibility. I always like to put the possibilities out there. This is a pattern that Ripple is does very commonly. We haven't really seen it on the absolute macro, but here was the one that we highlighted earlier in the year, and it does that, and it just comes straight back through the triangle. And there's a lot of these in that lower consolidations down here on the lower time frames that you can see. So it's something always to watch out for on Ripple, because it loves to make triangles and fake out and then die. But this immediate one here, this larger one, is of concern. So again, I do have an alert in there for now. Focus over it. I do have an alert in there for now because there's a monthly demand in there. But the consolidation here and the way this is kind of shaping up at the moment, I don't think it's looking that great. So, like I said, on a lot of the majors now, so some of the other ones look a bit different, or the ones I've looked at already look a bit different. The new majors look a bit more like this. So we have 4. What is that beeping? I don't know if you can hear that on the video, because that's going to be annoying for me. Hopefully it'll stop. Stop. Okay, so what we had here on a lot of these majors is I had 4-day supply, and so in the case of Ripple, closed below, came back up. I had the alert for that. In the case of Ripple, it swing failed it, and then dropped. So and in fact, so the retest, so it swing failed it. We then got an entry for a short on the retest. Then it didn't. What I was hoping is we'd get the tests on these 2-day demands a bit sooner. Yeah, I did have that on Ripple, but it came a bit later. It came down a bit lower. In the case of Ripple, it actually went up. So it did take out that zone that I looked for the original short in, but didn't come up to the higher zone here. So on the majors, we're going to have a mix of this. Like some of them, like this swing failed zone and drop back down. The case of, I think, LINK and maybe LTC, they just went back through the zones. And in the case of, I think, DOGE and Atom, they just rejected the zones, and just not as dramatically down as that, but just rejected straight off this zone. So the majors, there's been a massive mix. And there hasn't really been any rhyme or reason as to which ones have broken higher and which ones haven't. So in the case of Ripple, we did have 2-day demand here that gave a little bounce, but again, not even enough to get back up to that supply. I think I was toying with the idea of having an alert here for 3-day supply in there. And I'm actually more inclined to do that now. It's gone lower, but again, I know Ripple, and the fact it hasn't tested this 2-day up here kind of makes me think that it could do a quick run, and that would be another nice top signal if it does. If it runs into here and rejects there, that would be probably a whole market top signal. I guess similar to this. So you can sort of actually, there's a very similar structure over there, that had a 2-day supply in here, rejected slightly below, dropped down, but then when it went back up, it went to test the higher zone. So maybe we get something similar there. But again, just be conscious of that. But that's why I haven't alerted a more immediate supply for a short on Ripple. And then, yeah, so this monthly demand, again, very conscious of that triangle death pattern. Do not limit order here. And make that black cross to highlight don't limit order. That will be, the alert will go. And then wait for it to wick and do what it wants to do, particularly because it's left stops here. But also more specifically because this scenario where it just takes a wick straight through. Ideally, we want it to then close back above the monthly, the same way as this did, but we'll see. But if you want to limit order, then 1.46, 1.12, and then the annual level 0.82. You can limit order all the way down there, but do not limit order here. Just wait and see. And LTC. So Litecoin. Yeah, I still hate the high time frame structure on this, but yeah, so from a lower time frame perspective, so as I just said on Ripple, so this, you see this had a 4-day supply in here, and it just went straight back through it. And with hindsight, actually, this was a little bit stupid, and even so, I had alerts here for the 5-day supply, but I knew that with these little trend line stops here, so actually it's really unsurprising for me. It's gone back for that level, and this was just a stupid entry here. for the lower high. I was looking, I think there was an 8-hour supply in there, and I was looking for that maybe we'd get a lower high and then drop and take these trendline stops. But like I say, I knew there were stops above here, so with hindsight, that was silly. So I have been short biased on this just because it's Litecoin. Then again, that 2-day demand, which I think I said we had on BCH, that it ran through, again, barely got any bounce off that. I commented in the channel that there was this weekly below and now a 2 weekly that it could head for, so it got a better bounce off there, but still kind of drifting down. But similar to Bitcoin and Ether, a lot of these I'm just not confident enough of the structures as yet to be taking, confident of really looking for aggressive shorts. I still want to see a little bit more, but this is now starting to build some supply through here, but still on a major 2-week demand. So I want a bit more to play out on this before I add anything of interest. So it does have a monthly demand down there. If it comes down there, which obviously is marked as a 3-month, but shouldn't be. So that's Litecoin. BNB. I was hoping this would confirm. I did put a short entry in here, which just went off earlier. I was hoping this would confirm. Watch list. I was hoping this would confirm a 2-day supply before this tested. The reason I was a little bit more aggressive on this is so it has broken out of all-time high, and a kind of decent-ish breakout, not the world's best breakout. Doesn't like to go up very much. This still could be in a massive kind of upward ending diagonal type scenario. But the reason I put in that short was because the BTC pair hit the 6-month supply. So I thought it was worth looking. It was nice to have the odd little aggressive entry in there, the aggressive possibility. So it's a 4-hour supply in here. So you can keep an eye on that and see, but it's still, again, you can see this is very much in a triangle. So can still go either way at this point in time. It's come up quite high in that 4-hour now. So I still have an alert on this on the 5-day demand down here. And it's got a 2-week significantly lower. So this is similar to, it looks actually very similar to the total chart. So it's got the 2-week, although it's a lot lower, 2-week inside, but it has the 5-day and then it's got the 2-day inside it. So again, those are the entries, or those are the levels, not entries, but levels I'm looking for to hold, or looking for these to hold if we're going to continue this bullish up move and if this run is a decent breakout. But be very wary on this that we do have the Bitcoin pair at 6-month supply. Link obviously has been one of the strongest ones, so why it's worth looking at the Link BTC pair. So while like Link did hit monthly demand down here, but Link threw me off with this close below here, making the 6-month supply. And it's obviously not carrying and is just going straight back through it. And is in fact now almost at the top of that 6-month supply. So overarchingly, it is in an annual demand, I believe, but only by a tiny margin. And even, that 6-month, the supply was a 6-month demand before it closed, just slightly below. So again, the structure is still up, and you can see the similarities on this to the others and total 3 charts. I have been more reticent on this to look for long entries just because I have been nervous at that 6-month supply. But even when I have, I have one down here on the when it made the monthly demand and weekly demand down there. I think I added one here on the 2-day, but either way, it's not coming back to test even when I do have entries in there. So didn't come back to test that, didn't come back to test that, and I've now added. So this now does have a 2-week demand in here. So I have added a possible long entry in there. If it comes back to there, I've been less aggressive on the short side. Didn't quite hit the alert. I was looking for maybe for it to take out these highs, much the same as what LTC has done. My camera's going a bit crazy in this video. And so yeah, it does seem to want to run, but yeah, I haven't put any more aggressive shorts in because after this initial reaction off here didn't get very far. It's then looking like we're going to continue pushing As you can see, shorts are less reliable on this. They're giving little scalps and a decent one in there on the retest. But yeah, I want to see a bit more on this before I look for shorts because I think some of the other majors are better than looking for shorts. And ADA is another one. So ADA again had the initial reaction off the 4-day supply in there, didn't get very far and didn't get to my 2-day demand, which is where I wanted to look for a long on this. Solana and Doge came off this monthly demand at the low here. So some of my drawings, I didn't have those alerted, mainly because I just wasn't sure if we were going to go deeper inside, because I wasn't on top of the charts, but I just commented them verbally. So obviously a really nice reaction off there, and it's not surprising it's gone back and taken out the high. So we had the 4-day supply in here. We had the untested 12-hour at the top here. So the 12-hour it just didn't care about and it ran through. But again, this is a result of coming off a monthly demand. Then you expect the uptrend to be intact. So it doesn't surprise me this failed. Would have been nice if this had given the re-entry. This does have 2-week demand here. It's come right off the top of it. So I have put in a daily supply alert on this. But I put coming off, you can see in the note, coming off 2-week demand, so we'll see. So I don't necessarily get this is not a high probability short at this stage. So just keep an eye on what Bitcoin is doing. But it would be nice if this gets a rejection and actually brings this down to give a nicer entry lower. And then finally Doge, which is, so this is one of the weaker ones. This didn't have 4-day supply, but in fact had a 2-day supply. So it came up inside the 2-day supply again, gave the reaction, didn't quite get bound down to the demand, then went and swing failed the 2-day zone, but didn't get up to my 12-hour higher. So again, you can see that mix on these majors, you know, where Link just ran straight through everything. ADA gave the first reaction, but then didn't react off the top one, and the monthly played out. And the contrast, you know, Doge is on the monthly demand here, but has not had the same strength as ADA has coming off that level. So this is one of the few. I think there's only 2. This and DOT, I think, are the only 2 that have actually hit that 2-day level so far. In fact, no, the old majors, I think BCH and BCH, Litecoin, and Ripple hit early, so went through. These have hit with good timing. Doge and DOT have hit with good timing against where Bitcoin and Ether are at. So we're now seeing a bit of a bounce on these. But I just need to see more. So what I haven't talked about is the sort of bigger structure on these. So this you can see similar to the others chart has this potential just sort of rising channel here, which may just fall off a cliff. Or is it just building up? You know, it is coming off an annual demand at low, so this could just be a build-up consolidation for the bigger up move. And that's really making like this. It's making it difficult. You see, I've got a rogue box in here, so find out what this box is. Deleted a level by mistake. Okay, so that's a 2-month. Yeah, so the very high time frame structures are just a bit difficult on these. Same as the totals on others charts. It's that this is a possible double top. However, in this case, it did make an annual demand, weak annual demand. So the annual demand tells me it should go up. It's got a 6-month at the bottom as untested, so there is a draw to go back down lower if it wants to. We've still got a local uptrend, but then there's possible double top. So it does make it just difficult to come off monthly demand here as we wanted. So really, I kind of like it to go to this monthly supply up here. But yeah, so there's just lots of factors, and they makes it difficult for me to have actually an overarching view of where this might go. Like I want to be bullish on the annual demand, but I would have wanted to see a much better reaction than what we've had so far off that zone. But then obviously when it wants to, it can really push. And the difficulty is like by the time it's pushed, then it's too late, it's gone. So you've got to just buy every low. But also from my perspective, yeah, I just want to scalp this. Like I say, it's left, and people want to know when it's going to have its big run and when they should hold on to it. See, this is why I didn't want to stream, because the cough is now starting. Now I've talked for an hour. Yeah, so people want to know, when we're going to have this next big run. And that's why I always say, like from April till August now, we've had 6 to 8 months of messing around sideways versus, you'll get a couple of months of these up moves, but they only happen once in a blue moon. So you're actually much better off just trading these little scalps interim rather than just waiting for these big breakouts. Excuse me. Anyway, so this is giving a little bit of a scalp. So if you can get in on these levels here, when it hits a zone, if you can get in, if you want to hold it and see if it's going to play out this big annual demand, by all means do it. Personally, I would rather just get in here, get out there, see what happens, find a re-entry. But yeah, anyway, what I was saying is that you can see how these are in just very difficult, sort of overall kind of difficult channels / triangles of structures for the most part. Things like BNB is stronger, LINK is stronger, but then obviously is still in major supply. And something like DOGE is more like the ones I'll get to on the next page with this major there. The rest of the new majors, it's more of that sideways triangle. What's it doing? And that's what I'm seeing. So I have been through over a lot of alts over the last few days. And I really am seeing kind of a lot of similarities. So when we have on others where we see the upward channels that we have on LINK and ADA and the stronger ones, where what we're seeing on the E100 chart is more like some of these new majors where we're not making higher highs, we're not forming that upward channel, we're just forming this kind of triangle that again could break either way. And when you start to get to the point where you've got 1, 2, 3 bounces on the bottom of the triangle, and then, well, you can argue that's the start of the triangle. 1, 2, this one wick through, bounces on the top of the triangle, and you just sort of, then you've got to wait for it to break one way or the other. And for now, my bias on this is these are down. We are coming out of a 6-month supply, so I'll show you the very high time frame. There are people that are arguing, well, this is the up move and this is a retracement and now we're due for another up move. They might be right. But when I don't see any significant demand in here, like, we did have did bounce on a 3-day demand at the base there. So again, it's an alert I've had and talked about a number of times. If you're in from there and you want to hold this in the hope that we're going to get another one of these 2020-21 moves, by all means do it. But just do that when you're buying the lows. But what we see here is that we've got a 6-month supply up here. We are still rejecting. We've already had one rejection off the 3-month that's made that lower low. So, it could push from here. We could get a run, but we are still, we've dropped below this level. It's struggling to get back above. So what I really want to see on something like this, you can see that break of the level. It's rejecting the sellers that broke this level, and it's making a triangle at that point. So yeah, sure, this might, just be a deviation and just go be a deviation below this orange level. We can get a drop back maybe to the orange level and go up from there, possibly. But for now, for me, it's a downtrend. And that downtrend can still retrace up here and still be a downtrend. But yeah, it's up to you how you choose to read that. But this is it's a symmetrical triangle which can break either way, but it's in a bearish downtrend. Therefore, the chances are it's going to break down, not up. However, again, there's a long there off the 3-day demand. There's a long here off the weekly demand. There's a long here off the 2-day demand. What if you see these demands, buy them. Stops, very easy stops right below the low or right below each of these zones. And if it breaks down, you're out. If it breaks up, then you're in. Maybe you get that massive run. But yeah, I'm a bit loath anyway to put more entries on these until I see them break one way or the other, or just see what the market's going to do. So this one's a little bit more like DOGE anyway. We've had the 4-day supply alert. It dropped down off there, but didn't get to the 2-day demand. Swing failed, but didn't get to my 12-hour supply, and now we're sort of thinking about it again. So we'll just see. If I start to see massive moves on these, and if you look at all the BTC pairs for all these majors except for Sol, actually, so Atom, Dot, and NEIRO, all are just really, really ugly. But again, they could result into consolidations, but at the moment they're pretty ugly and they're weak, very weak compared to everything else. So Yes, they're consolidating. Yes, they're sideways. Yes, they might break up, but at the moment it's not showing any signs of strength that make me think, yeah, buy this and hold it for the moon. And yeah, it's up to you. If you see something different, feel free to let me know. Answers on postcard, please, but that's just my view of this. Yeah, so DOT, nothing new. So I've got, they've still got the alert for the 12-hour supply here if it comes and tests there. And then this 4 or 5 day up here in various other zones if it comes back up and test that 6 month inside there. So we haven't tested this 6 months. You never know. It might run up to test that 6 month. And it's coming off the 3-day demand at the low, but it's just not something. When you see this, so again, we had this up move, but it hasn't been able to break these sellers. So what we're looking at now is a battle between the sellers up here and then the buyers down there. Arguably the sellers all the way over here. And then this massive 3 months of selling there. So that's what a triangle is telling you. It's telling you about that indecision. Yeah, so not much more to say on DOT there. Atom, pretty much the same. So Atom also bounced off the 2-day demand, but I didn't have an alert on that. So anyone who follows me knows I've been much more bearish on Atom than anything else because it still hasn't tested because I really want this to test down here. It doesn't have to, but there's a 2-week and then a monthly. So I will have the alert for that. So I'd really like to see this break down before looking for longs. It's not dissimilar to DOT. But DOT did actually hit the 3-day demand down here, whereas this hasn't yet. This also keeps making new supply above. We've got a 6 month in there, but it's similar to DOT. It's coming off 3 month supply here. It is pushing, it does have a monthly in there, week monthly, but it is pushing higher inside that. So again, but it's exactly the same. This is a little bit more of a channel, but still that kind of channel slash triangle, similar to what DOT's doing. It's just in a sideways consolidation. But again, up to you if you want to buy the lows and sell the highs. So it hasn't quite hit that 12-hour up there. It's also got a 4-day weekly and also another monthly up here if it does decide to break higher. Yeah, for me, this is just a sideways consolidation. We didn't have a strong move. We had a decent move off this last consolidation here, but it went up into annual supply. The annual supply is played out, but it hasn't got to a demand where I want to buy this from a high time frame perspective. So I still think that needs more time. NEIRO I wanted to be more bullish on in the higher time frame because of this bounce of 3 monthly demand, or is it? Yeah, there's either because there's a bounce on the 3 monthly demand here. However, it's just really not picking up like some of the others are. But we shall see. So it's still in 3-week supply here, but yeah, so it's still got in the lower time frames, it's still doing that. It's actually the same type of triangle structure that it's more of a square box sideways structure that similar to DOT and Atom. Yeah, this didn't quite hit my alert here for this 4-day and weekly demand, so I have reset that alert. So we'll see what happens if it comes down to that level. I want to be bullish on this. Like, I like the fact it's taken out the lows here, but I want that to see that test in here and hold for a push up. If it is a big 3-month zone, it could still come down deeper inside the zone if it wants. There's a 3-week down the bottom, yeah, so it could. It reminds me of Ether BTC, quite honestly. Again, it's a difficult one because we've got demand here. This demand hasn't been strong enough to make a new high. So again, it's just that sort of giant triangle structure. And it's slap bang. If we talk about this as a massive range, it's kind of basically it's in the bottom third of the range. So I guess you can buy it based on being on the bottom third. But yeah, I need to see some break on. I think I just need to see overall the market, some things start to break out and hold, and to see if that's going to drag the rest of the market with it. But the thing is, we are seeing, having said that, we are seeing things, some things break out, like LINK, for example, or BNB, but it's not dragging everything else up with it. And that's why I don't believe in alt season. I guess I've said that so many times. As if things are looking more bullish, then buy them and hold them if you want to. But don't buy this, I think, assuming it's going to become bullish, because that does assume alt season. It assumes the money is going to rotate from Bitcoin to everything else. And sure, it's going to rotate from Bitcoin to Ether, or potentially, or people will buy the bigger things, but you know, maybe Solana, the chains, and you know, the newer AI stuff, maybe if it can get media attention and awareness, you know, ridiculous things like FARTCOIN, but this kind of old stuff like DOT and NEIRO, unless you know, maybe it's doing something really, really good, you know, but maybe its product is great. I know nothing about the product, so like, if that's what you want, like if you do want to buy and hold some of the larger coins that are safer to hold, at least for some period, then at least know your fundamentals of them. Don't just buy them because it's going sideways and it's probably going to go up from here. Like NEIRO is all right, you know, it is on a monthly demand. So, you know, it is, you know, if you want to buy based on the fact we've got a bounce in here and we might look for, you know, another wave higher, then that's fine. So you can buy on an investment on a macro structure on some of these. But when you look at, you know, DOT and Atom, which are kind of going, and other things that are going down to all-time lows, don't be buying them thinking that they must go back up, because I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that is the case. Anyway, how am I going? 1 hour and 30. Obviously longer than I wanted to, as always. So Solana was a difficult one as well. Solana's actually in 3 months supply, but I've hidden the zone. So it did make a 3 month by closing this red candle below here. These 2 green candles. However, it's coming up inside. I've hidden the zone because obviously it's come higher inside. It's made a monthly demand and it's hitting a monthly supply. So in kind of the big picture, this is still obviously a giant triangle. And again, looks more like the others chart with the possibility of that head and shoulders. But with the challenge of coming off monthly demand here. I really don't like the BTC pair on this. I think it can go lower, so that makes me less inclined to be bullish on Solana without seeing the BTC pair drop further first. This one, so on the lower time frame, I think this didn't have the 4-day supply. This had a 2-day supply, but I actually hadn't alerted it. So this was the only one that I had the alert for the monthly demand here. So that was really nice long and went straight up to what would have been my target. So I've said just to take out these, there's some equal highs here on the low time frames that I'd had alerted for a while. And I just thought, yeah, that was a possibility for a stop hunt into that level. And that sort of worked out really quite nicely. Nicer than I expected, actually. I would really wanted that to happen back here. This like totals chart's got the 2-week demand in here. So a handful of these majors have this 2-week demand now, but not all of them. So again, just pick your poison. Like if you want to go in the majors, if you think total 3 is going to break out, pick the ones that have 2-week demand. Like don't pick all, and with all the monthlies below. So this is coming off a monthly and it's now coming off a 2-week. So on this, I have alerted the 2-day in there. Maybe won't get hit. Maybe will not get hit. We'll see. The risk on this is that head and shoulders, and the fact this can be corrected pattern before falling further. But yeah, so in the short term, these are my kind of immediate levels. Just looking at that 2-day in there. I've got another alert here for this daily down here that hasn't been tested. Maybe you could get a test on the if there's a 3-week, or is that a 3-week, or is that a fake 3-week? Yeah, it's a fake 3-week. So there is a weekly demand in here that wasn't quite tested. So it's really just a question now is, are we going to get more crawling around? You know, are we going to continue this sideways kind of stuff where we just, you know, if we come down here, we just go bounce on the level that gives a scalp. If we come down here, we go bounce on the level that gives a scalp, etc. Or are we going to end up, you know, with some bigger move like that, or some bigger up or up move? It doesn't have to be down. Because now, when you're looking at these triangles and these channels and things like that, these aren't strong zones. So, you know, that's fine. You know, that was a fine entry being monthly demand. But unless this monthly wants to have a big move and break out here, and then this is not strong demand until we see it strong demand. So yes, I alerted. But at the moment, it hasn't been enough to do any takedown out that high. So it could hold. We could still get another up move off there based on the triangle correction. Or locally, we might be looking at the zigzag direction and come down to this weekly, even lower. So yeah, while I'm alerting these, they are on strong demands. And we've already seen that so far. So go back to the original majors and you see that here. This 2-day on this is a different structure, to be fair, on Litecoin, but it wasn't a strong demand. It didn't have a significant move to take out this high. It had a bit of consolidation. It looks a bit like a manipulation move here. And BCH is pretty similar. Yeah, it's just that these are more aggressive than that one on Sol, to be fair. But yeah, anyway, I think that is everything on the majors. Covered all of the majors now, so at least where I'm looking at and what my concerns are and what things that you can consider. But like I said, really very much rely on the fundamentals. If you want to buy these for investment, pick the ones that you think are fundamentally sound, do your research. Because at the moment, you can just look at all the brown that you see on these charts, is that while this may be consolidating and could break through, it is under 6 months supply. It's under monthly and 6 monthly supply. It's under monthly supply. NEIRO is coming off monthly demand, but pick the ones that are coming off major demands and not rejecting out of major supplies. Very quickly on alts. So alts, as I've said, are very much just trading both directions. I need to kind of do another section on my list. I spent some time doing some admin this week, getting rid of some old pairs that have been discontinued on XC, so I'm not charting things unnecessarily in my list of 700. Gorilla BSC is one of them. What did that do? Yeah, great entry, but this is being delisted. So anyway, go back. So MKR's just hit a 2-month demand there, so you can keep an eye on that. API 3 hit 3-month supply, keep on that. On the short side, I had a re-entry on, I think it was a 2-hour supply that I put an alert on earlier today. So we had the first alert hit yesterday, and then the re-entry alert went today. It's still early days on this. If this flips, it's still an 8-hour, 4-hour demand. If that flips to supplies, then you can look for shorts based on that on the lower time frames. And then, I've had a whole bunch of stuff hit demands, and they're all just varying. So K here, for example, is a high risk. It was an 8-hour demand. That 2 days are not confirmed yet. I just drew it early. That's a high risk entry, new coin. Keep an eye on that if you want. You never know. At least it gives you a nice defined stop. Then we've got things like API and ALU and screaming children outside my window. So ALU, huge move. Now up and hitting 6 months supply here. So I said, well, it's definitely worth looking for a short on that. I've alerted here 12-hour supply for a possible short re-entry. Again, still early days, but we'll see. But yeah, API 3 and ALU are ones that you could get decent shorts on. Epic, I had an alert for all-time high, and this can go either way. So this does have a 2-week demand. So this is not necessarily a short entry. This is just a keep an eye on it entry. The lower time frames. So it's still got 8-hour demand in here. So I need to see just what happens off this. I like to see development. If this builds up, if it bounces off, I won't long this now, but if it does bounce off here and gets higher and starts making more demand, then we can look for longs on this later. Else we're looking for, if it breaks this and flips it to supply, then I'd be looking for shorts. But shorts on this, again, a bit more dubious because of the new 2-week demand, and the alert I've got for long is slightly lower on a 5-day. That's that. Then we've got some of the stronger ones like ZORA, and now coming back to levels that I wanted to look for longs. So ZORA unfortunately missed my daily short alert, daily supply up here, and is now coming down to hit weekly demand in there. Sort of 2-day a bit lower. So, some of these ones that have been very strong before have now had some retracements into major zones. So those are the ones you should start looking at, see if you can get re-entries if they are going to keep going. That's a good example on ZORA. Bio was one I just spotted yesterday, and I just said if it makes 3-day demand in here, that it was worth watching for longs on this because it's got a lot of scope. Just could just run through everything. It's a nice looking chart at the moment for that aggressive entry in there. So it didn't quite test it, and may make daily. I think but it made a 2-day, so it didn't quite test the 3-day, but it did make a 2-day as well and tested that. Might make a daily today, which again I've got drawn in. I have got an alert here just so this is an aggressive entry on this for a possible 12-hour, or there is a 12-hour demand in there for a possible long entry. Just be conscious here of the possibility this is swing failing the high. So it either could come back down to this 3-day because it wasn't quite tested, or if it's swing failed the weekly zone, maybe it's going to drop from here. So it's a little bit more risky now with that swing fail, but yeah, the alert's there for that. See what happens. What else have I talked about? All of these now except bank. So bank's just, yeah, a bit more of a random one. It's just hit a random 2-day demand. So this is one that I could go either way. It's like triangling like everything else. May or may not hold this level. Wouldn't really want to be overly confident on this. So I've just got a whole mix of things hitting at the moment. You know, form has come down. That's one I had on that other layout, but again, it's finally hit a zone of interest, a possible long entry. So that's worth watching. Then we had a few other like really more aggressive shorts hit, possible shorts. So this hack 3-day supply there. FRAG was an aggressive short that came down quite well. J is another aggressive one off 3-day supply, but still on weekly demand. And then I had a whole bunch yesterday hit. Excuse me. I might have to sign off because this is, I could feel a big coughing fit coming. A whole bunch yesterday hit these demands. So 3-day demand here, I think this was going on there. Don't know what happened there. My eyes are watering now from the coughing. But yeah, a whole bunch of things hit demand, so there's nothing wrong with looking for starting to look for long entries now if BTC does hold. Some more and less aggressive. But yeah, really be looking. You need to be looking at what the structures are doing. So some of the very new ones I think are worth watching, because these could still do big runs. You know, be that random one that does a big run. BDXM is one of the ones I was looking at for that possibility as well. Weekly demand here. PUMPFUN hit 2-day demand down there. So there's a lot of scalps that can be had off these levels. ZBCN is obviously one of the ones that's been strong as well. Didn't quite hit my re-entry for short up there, although to get to the 12-hour rather than the daily inside. But yeah, so there's heaps of trades that can be taken at the moment, but just don't get wedded to one direction. And I think the last thing I'll just quickly run over FARTCOIN because I know everybody likes FARTCOIN and keeps wanting to look for longs on it. So this is one of the ones that I would absolutely say don't look for longs on. That's my personal opinion. It's up to you, obviously. So there are 2 factors. So on the long side, we have a 2-month demand. It's already hit and did go up and take out the high. It's a weak demand, so it didn't take out this high, but just took out the last high of the previous candle. But it's now made 1 month's supply, so I've been short biased based on the 1 month supply. This is a possibility. This retraces a long way down if it wants to. So yes, it might, the 2-month demand might still play out. You know, maybe it would take out that low, or maybe it's just going to consolidate in here. Maybe. But for me, the more recent is that 1 month supply. So I'm still short biased until we get down probably into here. And again, this reminds me a lot of the Sol BTC chart. And this is just that common distribution pattern when we have this up move, we have this retrace, we have a distribution, and then it just falls from here. And the difficulty with these is like when you do look at this on the log chart, it looks vastly different. So this, you know, it looks like it could very reasonably fall to here. It looks like, you know, it doesn't look that bad, you know, when you look at it where it's come from. However, when you look on the linear chart, it looks significantly worse. So I'm always quite torn as to whether I should look on the log or linear charts just to see as to what, you know, because I feel like your bias is just pushed in one direction regardless, depending on which chart you look at. So if I look at the linear chart, you know, obviously this is retraced all the way down. I mean, actually fair, both of these charts make me actually bear biased. But the log chart makes me slightly more confident. It feels like it's gone up higher, but I still feel like it's going to come back down and test this zone. or that's where I would want to look for a long next. So I have been more biased to the short side. So I had the initial alert for monthly supply in there. So that was here, which had a nice reaction. I did know this was slightly, so initially actually I had the alert up here, and then I just thought, no, I'm going to be more aggressive. So I put it for the daily. It hadn't quite hit this 8-hour supply in here. So this was kind of foolish. So with hindsight, I put that for the retest entry. But after it's dropped all the way down here, the fact it hadn't tested this 8-hour supply means the chances of it going back up and going back into that zone are fairly high. So I did reset the alert, but that was, again, really nice reaction off there. And then slightly annoyingly, so I did put an alert here for 4-hour supply yesterday, but it has front run me. But again, like that would be the kind of re-entry. The difficulty now on this is you really want it to fall now. I actually don't know if I want it to come back up into here at this point. What else have we got? So we've also got a 4-day supply in there. We might make a 5-day. Yeah, we didn't make the weekly on this. If we'd made a weekly, I would have been more confident of this one. But again, yeah, now because we've come off, made a daily supply and it's come off slightly below, I was just a little bit too conservative on that. If this is still holding this as support, what it's then saying to me is that this supply isn't very strong. Like I really want this to just fall. So is that supply stronger than this demand? You know, so if it does hold here for much longer, yeah, you can still watch this for a short, but if it comes back up into there and hangs out there or has made new demand, then get out, because then it's probably going to go back up into here. And again, going to be very dependent on what Bitcoin's doing. Although I can see Bitcoin is now starting to fall again. Ether's starting to come down as well. Obviously, no my luck, it's sort of like front run my short entry. I haven't seen the alert come through, so I guess it has. But yeah, anyway, so that's FARTCOIN. And maybe I'll just finally look at SUI. Because again, people like this. Yeah, okay, so this made this monthly demand. It's not the best one, though. It's double candle. I'd rather see this make a 2-monthly demand. That's one of the other things on the alts I actually haven't touched on. So 3-week closes and 2-month closes, and even the 2-week close that we've just had already. So those are the ones that you should really be looking at if you want to long things. You're looking at the 3-week close at the end of this week, the 2-week that's already happened, and then the monthly, obviously, in 10 days, 11 days time. That's really going to, I think, sort the wheat from the chaff. Anything that has a 2-month demand is obviously going to be much more bullish. So this has monthly, but it's not a very strong one. It hasn't really closed. It's only closing the swing failure into that zone there. Still holding that 2 days, so we should leave that. Yeah, a little bit indecisive on that one at the moment. So yeah, this had 5-day supply and it's come up inside and it's tried to flip it 5-day demand, but it's just a sideways on that 5-day. But the supply is still holding, but then, yeah, I probably shouldn't take that off now, actually. Yeah, I don't like it. So you can see the supply is created by that green candle there with the pink line. But then these 2 green candles, it's then closed above this red candle. So then it's flipped it to a 5-day demand. Both zones are weak. The 5-day supply was stronger. The demand side is weak. But then the demand side is supported by this monthly. So yeah, a little bit in 2 minds about that one. But now also has a 2-day supply. So this isn't something I want to short. Because of the monthly demand. So if you're in this and you're in this below it, I think you can probably hold on to it, or at least trail or stop or whatever, because it's got the monthly demand. It's one of the very few ones that have. It's came off the 3-month here at the low, made a new monthly. If you want to look for re-entry longs or something, then ideally back down here, or we just need a bit more time through, or like now I want to see this. If you want to trade off this monthly with your stop there, that's up to you, but then this zone isn't that far off. Or if you want to trade off this 2-day, again, up to you. But what I want to see is for this to come up and test this 2-day, see what happens. If it goes through it, then you can just long on retest. So it's fairly simple. If it's struggling to break this trend line, which I know quite a few people have drawn. So yeah, I have an alert down here for the 5-day, 4-day demand, whatever that is there. 4-day. There's a 4-day is the higher one, and then there's a 5-day inside. But again, just be conscious it's got this trend line stops. And so many of these do have the trend line stops. So again, you probably don't want to limit order that. But just wait and see if that gets tested and see if it can still hold. This is potentially forming just a sort of local range. And again, if this demand is insufficient to break out the high, there is the possibility it comes back down here. But again, that might take longer, and we need to see this reaction here first, because that could still bring it higher. Anyway, that's it. I think, well, so much my short stream. That's 1 hour, 50 minutes, but it's still potentially shorter than if I'd had people talking to me, because that tends to distract me in a million different directions. But anyway, I'm glad I've done a stream, and I will upload this now and try and do timestamps on it. We'll get ChatGPT to help me with that. Actually, Gemini's better. I hope that's useful. If you have any requests or any questions, please let me know. I'd like to do a quick summary, but I can't really remember what I've said now. I don't think you really need a summary. I think if you watch the start of it, you'll know exactly what my thoughts are on Bitcoin, yeah, both on the high and lower time frames, and Ether the same. So Ether, yeah, has rejected a 2-hour supply there, but hasn't quite made it. And Bitcoin's just being really painful and ugly at the moment, quite honestly. On both of these, yeah, I think the too long don't read summary version on both Bitcoin and Ether is they are both still in uptrends, but there are things on the macro that make them look quite tenuous. So there is nothing wrong with doing shorts now as well. Both of them have choppy 8-hour, 12-hour daily supply with untested zones. I think the zones are very, very clear, the ones that haven't been tested on both. So I don't think there's anything wrong with just looking. So as I've said, and I say they're clear, so 2-hour supply here on Ether that hasn't been tested. There's the 4-hour and the daily below, and obviously all-time high. On Bitcoin, we've got liquidations at 120 and the 61 fib there, so I don't think there's anything wrong with looking there. Then we've got the daily zone below. And then if you look at the lower time frames, we've still got a 12-hour that hasn't been tested here. We've got a 2-hour inside, but you just need to assess those as and when they're hit. And then there's also a 2-hour here. And this other daily, I think there's a daily indirect up there. It was a daily, but it was already tested on the lower time frame. So, but yeah, you can see there's 8-hour, there's 12-hour, there's just a lot of zones. So short of me alerting every single one of them, I don't want to do that. So I just need to assess things as and when they're hit. One other thing actually I haven't covered at all in this session is the data. And I won't go into any of that now, but what you do need to be aware of, and I commented in the Telegram channel yesterday, is that so we had some selling starting to come in on even including BlackRock the day before yesterday at the end of last week, and BlackRock was still buying at the end of last week, but the others were starting, the bigger ones starting to sell. We did have a lot more selling yesterday. So on both Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs, Ethereum particularly had a lot of selling going on yesterday, less on BlackRock, but some big selling going in on Grayscale and on Fidelity. And so, yeah, I think I talked about it briefly in the BTC update, but where given that the ETFs have really pushed this run on both Bitcoin and Ether, much less so than the retails. If you look at the other data and the CBDs and the exchange data, there was much less pushing from spot on the retail side. There was some pushing from derivatives on Bitcoin, so on Ethereum, but very much this run was being pushed by the ETF buying. So if they stop, then there is a distinct possibility these can fall hard. And I did say that yesterday. But if they, they stop buying, sure. But if they also start selling heavily, there's no retail to absorb. So just be careful on that. Unfortunately, we don't know this data until after the end of the day. The Arkham data, which I was using to look at transfers to and from the ETF funds, became markedly less reliable I mean, maybe I'll check them again now. You can see there's a whole load of red here, but they became markedly less reliable because these are for transfers. They're not just sales or buys. They're not just buying and selling. It's also transfers. So Fidelity here, for example, has transferred 130 BTC and then 260 of another 130. So 3 transfers of 520 BTC to this address. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a sale. Like it could just be a transfer to another address. So, while when I first started looking into data, we didn't have much of that. We're now having a lot more of that. So it makes it quite hard to judge whether we're actually getting genuine selling. Are these all sells? But I'm not going to know until the end of the day when I can go to here and see if that was actually Fidelity selling 520 Bitcoin. So yeah, we'll see. Anyway, I digress. I hope that's been useful. Like I say, please like and subscribe if you're interested, and please join my Telegram channel. And if you have any questions, comments on the video, or join Telegram and come and chat to me. It might have way more interesting when I have different people and new people chatting to me. And please feel free to share any charts if you want help or advice, or to argue with me about something, because I love a good debate. Anyway, have a great day, and I will hopefully do a stream later this week. Bye.